Mark Riley on Six Music, and the news has reached us and sadly been confirmed that Mark E. Smith did pass away today, and well, it was lined up anyway, and it's something that we considered maybe not doing, but Giddy's there, and it would be good to have a chat with him, to be honest. Hello, mate.
Hello, Mark. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to hear this news tonight as well, and I know listeners will be very sad to hear it as well, and it's the added emotion of having you announce it a short time ago as well. I know that must have been very, to put it mildly, emotional for you as well, because there's a lot of talk about people going on particular journeys and adventures with it musically, but I know obviously there are other musicians involved as well in the records you made. The extraordinary records you made together with Mark E. Smith and the other musicians with The Fall are just wonderful, and records of which you should be proud, and I would hope he was proud as well. And to hear you make that announcement was a very sad news anyway, but a very emotional moment as well.
You know, I mean, it is strange. I mean, Mark never, I'd not spoken to Mark for a long time. And of course, after I got kicked out of the band, it was a pretty unsavoury time. And then I got to know him again a little bit, and then it all kicked off again. So it's all in a book written by Steve Hanley, actually. But I have to say that I met Mark E. Smith when I was 16, and I went to see The Fall. They were opening for, I think it was probably Wayne County and the Electric Chairs. Mm-hmm. And I went away and I made a Fall T-shirt. And it often strikes me, that if I hadn't have made that T-shirt, I probably wouldn't be sat here now doing this, because I went to the next Fall gig wearing the T-shirt. Mark saw it and asked me to become a roadie. And then at age 16, he really did teach me so much. He taught me a load about life, and he certainly taught me a load about music, and we're going to be playing some of the bands that he influenced me into listening. But we were talking last night, about Arthur Lee, who's just, a maverick and a genius, and we're going to be playing Captain Beefheart before long. And The Fall were my favourite band when I joined, and they were still my favourite band when I got kicked out.
Yeah, I don't want to impress you too much on that, but yes, that itself, joining that band and being a part of that band must have been quite something for you, and adding to that band as well, Mark, lest we forget what you did with that band, and so that's what makes today all the more emotional for you.
Yeah, no, it is. It's it's been talked about, and that's why we didn't know when the news came through. You don't know if this is news or if this is just some misinformation along the way. But as I say, sadly, it's true. So Mark E. Smith passed away earlier today. So I'm going to finish the rest of the programme now playing a couple more tunes by The Fall and a couple of tunes that I know that Mark really loved. So, thanks for your words, Gid. Much appreciated.
Claire Crane is here. How
Hello.
you doing? Lisa in West Norwood has been on. Said, my husband Matt had a lengthy dance-off 15 years ago with Mark E. Smith at a Joe Cornish and Adam Buxton party. Pretty frenzied. Mark E. was unstoppable. Matt will never forget it. We love The Fall. And you have a party experience of Mark E. Smith.
Yes, when I was very young, I went to one of my mum and dad's Christmas parties.
Because they ran a rehearsal studio in space.
It was called 23 New Mount Street in Manchester, and it had lots of recording studios, Clint Boone with the Spiral Carpets there, and The Fall were there.
Right.
And Mark E. Smith was up singing Kylie Minogue's I Should Be So Lucky on karaoke.
You've just got to love that, haven't you? You've got to love that. Yeah. So obviously, if anybody in a band in the North has at some point sort of, heard The Fall, been affected by The Fall, been influenced by The Fall, been intrigued by Mark E. Smith.
Of course.
And you've been talking to Tim Burgess.
I have indeed. He's got some very fond memories. He posted a lovely tribute on Twitter to him, and I spoke to him earlier about the first time they met.
In 1990, I went to Prestwich for the album launch party of Extricate, which was The Fall's new album, and they had it in a pub in Prestwich. So I arrived early because I was kind of really keen, and the only other person who was there was Mark, and he was at the bar. And so he was kind of waiting to host his own party, and I just stood there and started talking to him, and everything he kind of said from that point on, I never really knew whether he was joking or not.
How will you remember your friendship and your kind of memories with Mark?
Just an amazing way of me growing up as a massive fan, and then becoming his mate.
Thank
and
you.
Also that he always asked for a round instead of a drink.
I'm taking that.
I remember doing a program, on the Hit the North on Radio 5, and Marky Smith coming in, and he did this interview. I think they'd just been signed to a new label, and so a bloke he didn't know brought him in who was from that label, and who I knew from before. And Marky Smith did the interview, and then afterwards he says, "Who's that bloke then?" I said, "Oh, he works for the record company." He says, "Right, I'll go and sting him for a few pints."
Yeah, get the round in.
Now, I had a very strange experience last night, not as strange as Mark Riley, because I was doing the folk show, and
Yes.
Stick in the Wheel were doing a session, and Nicola from the band Stick in the Wheel said, "Oh, I think Marky Smith's died." So we had been hearing that he was not at all well, so it was not a shock. So on my way out at 8 o'clock last night, I came in this studio where Mark Riley was doing his programme, and I said, "Have you heard this?" He said, "We're just trying to verify it." So,
Yeah.
Mark, who was with him, of course, at some of the really memorable and landmark moments in the Fall's history. But, like a lot of people in the Fall, had long-standing differences.
Of course,
with
yeah.
Marky Smith.
He did.
Yeah.
And it was the reaction to the news last night that he was counting back to that time where he wore the T-shirt to the Fall gig. Here it is.
But I have to say that I met Marky Smith when I was 16, and I went to see the Fall. They were opening for, I think it was probably Wayne County and the Electric Chairs. Mm-hmm. And I went away and I made a Fall T-shirt. And it often strikes me, that if I hadn't have made that T-shirt, I probably wouldn't be sat here now doing this, because I went to the next Fall gig wearing the T-shirt. Mark saw it and asked me to become a roadie. And then at age 16, he really did teach me so much. He taught me a load about life, and he certainly taught me a load about music. And the Fall were my favourite band when I joined, and they were still my favourite band when I got kicked out.
So that was Mark talking to Gideon last night. Towards the end of Mark's show when he just got the news.
Yeah, and of course, like all the reactions there of Mark, 4 decades of hiring and firing musicians throughout the Fall. 66 musicians came and went.
There's a great book actually, and we had him on, Dave Simpson,
yes,
the journalist who did a book about trying to track down everybody who'd been in the Fall. So that's an interesting read. Yeah,
but as much as there was one where he apparently fired a sound technician for ordering a salad.
Yes.
But on the other side, he hired somebody that just posted a letter through his door. Do you know what I mean? So it was all balanced. There was a contradiction all the way through, and it was just so fantastic of him, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But it was all about the music as well. They had a relative success with Infotainment Scan, the album that got top 10 in the 90s, and the cover of Holly and Dozier's There's a Ghost in My House, which was top 40. But that wasn't ever the point of the Fall. Mark's thing was all about, his lyrics, his creating of, the different influences, those obscure influences that came to him that created the fantastic lyrics of the Fall's music. And here he is discussing them back on radio in 1985 with the BBC.
I'm told I use too many words, but you see, what I have is a very original approach to writing, you see, because it's not educated, but it's not jargonised, I don't think. I hope it's not. I just write sort of stuff, that supposedly has got something to say, you see. So sometimes I forget about that. I mean, that's a good thing. I mean, it's something you've got to remember. You're writing music, and you've got to have a word that puts a chill up everybody's spine and stuff. It doesn't matter what the word is, it's the way you use it with the music. Sometimes I sort of overreach myself and I just write a lot, and I think it's good and perverted by language a lot. It happens a lot that, it's just the verse is the main part of the song,
There you go, talking about his own writing techniques.
It was great hearing Bricks as well talk about all those lyrics and all the sheets and picking them up. And
a carrier bag full of thousands of pounds.
Of course, Elizabeth Olker's documentary with Mark and lots of other people, John Cooper Clarke, John Leckie, produced 3 of their 1980s albums. Clint Boone and lots of other fantastic contributors is on Six Music on Sunday. You can listen to that. It's a totally wild world of the Fall.
Bricks Smith Stark joins us. Hey, Bricks. I mean, this must be a day of mixed emotions, but great sadness for you.
I'm so sad, Ma. I'm still really in shock, and this is really the first time I've spoken about it publicly. I'm trying to digest it, and it's yeah, really, just hearing that over the radio, just I have like a lump in my throat. So.
Yeah. What is your abiding memory of Mark today? Obviously, we talked a lot about the book. I've never forgotten you describing when you moved into that flat with him, and the scene you had. And he had no fridge, and the milk was kept on the windowsill. And I've never forgotten that picture. What's your abiding picture of Mark today?
I mean, Mark was such a complex human being, and there's been so much said about him in the press by people who didn't really know him or only were shown one side of him.
Yeah.
But obviously, he was my husband, my first love, my writing partner, my mentor. So I know him deeply. And, people need to understand, yes, he was complex. Yes, he was driven. He created chaos. He was a maverick. He was a free thinker. When people say people move, they push the envelope.
Yeah.
For Mark, there was no envelope. He created completely from the ether. He was absolutely amazing. But he was also a really, at times, super loving human being and a gentleman, which, is something that's not often talked about. But I can tell you that he was chivalrous, and he was a super great supporter of mine, certainly in the early days and all my time in the fall. And, so incredibly brilliant man.
You said a couple of things. You said created chaos, and obviously everybody knows that some of the time he was perhaps he was gallant to you, but some of the people in the bands perhaps might not feel they were treated that way. But do you think that was his natural personality, or do you think, as you say, he created chaos to see what came out of that? He was deliberately sort of self-destructive of his own group to see what happened.
Well, yes. I mean, he deliberately did. This is one of the ways that he worked. If things got too safe, he'd shake it up and pull the rug out from underneath everybody, because in creating chaos, it caused us to work harder and find a different route to the same solution. And by doing that, new ideas were born from the ether, and it actually, as a group, it forced us to be better musicians, to think on our feet, to be able to cope with any circumstances. And more importantly, he knew that was the recipe to keep the Falls music fresh and alive and evolving and different. And that is why the Falls music stood the test of time. Whether he knew what he was doing consciously or unconsciously, I believe it was conscious. Although it wasn't always pleasant to be a part of the chaos when it was swirling around you and you had to hold the ship. You had to try and right the ship. But that was a brilliant way of working, and that's the way that he worked. And a lot of people don't know this, but before every show, he used to ask us to stand in a circle and hold on to each other, and then he would say, "Now rotate anti-clockwise," which is like literally manipulating the energy flow of the earth and shaking it up even before he went on stage.
Was he always right? I mean, people talk about him always having the carrier bag. Was he prolific? Was he always scribbling on bits of paper?
Yes, he was always scribbling on bits of paper. In our house, there were stacks and stacks and stacks of unused lyrics, bits and pieces, cut-up technique. He also carried a carrier bag because it looked really discreet. So he would, lots of times we'd be on tour in Europe, and he'd have a carrier bag stuffed with thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds of money and carry it around, and no one would ever nick it off him or steal the Tesco bag, So he really was a carrier bag man.
Yeah. Well, listen, it's so kind of you to come on live with us today and everything. And I suppose with the Extricated, when you do some of those fall songs, I mean, that is going to be an emotional thing, even more so now, isn't it?
Yeah, right now, I can't even get my head around any of that. I'm just really trying to take in the fact that Mark is gone, and I am wavering through an emotional ocean at the moment.
Yeah,
trying to kind of keep it together. And so, yes, it will be emotional. I'll get to that point eventually, but right now, it's time. I'm just so happy that. In Mark's life, I don't think the fall was ever fully appreciated. And it's sad to say, but as he's passing, I think more people will now be aware of the music and the contribution to the arts and to the music world that the man brought, and his unique brilliance. And I just think, sadly, in his passing now, the flag is going to be raised and everyone's going to be aware. So let's celebrate the fall today, shall we?
Absolutely. And all our love to you, Bricks, and send our love to Steve and Paul and all the guys, won't you?
Oh, and can I say to Mark, can we say to everybody that's contacted me on Twitter, me and the band personally, we thank you so much for all of your loving tweets and condolences and best wishes. And they mean so much. Honestly, really, it means so much to me. So thank you.
Thanks a lot, Bricks. You take care. Kick a Conspiracy, of course, by The Fall, and an Uber fan, I think that's not overstating it, is Stuart Lee. Hey, Stuart. I mean, it's sad news, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
So when did you first hear, when did your love affair with The Fall begin?
Well, like a lot of people, when I was a teenager, I used to listen to John Peel under the bedclothes at night, and I remember it was sort of in between, in the run-up to the Hex Induction Hour album, they were playing lots of sessions by The Fall and whatever, and I found it incredibly annoying, the music. I thought it's repetitive and droning, and the man can't sing, and the words don't make any sense. I sort of hated it, and gradually, by attrition, I became absolutely fascinated in it. And I think of course, they're my favourite group of all time because of that. And I think it's brilliant that way that your initial reaction to it can be so strong, but you know there's something there, and then it just, once it's got you, you never let it go.
I was going to ask you what drew you in, so it's interesting, really, because you've said initially it repelled you. So what? So that's an even more interesting question than it first appeared, isn't it? What made you stick with it?
I don't know. It was you couldn't escape it if you listened to John Peel. I think it just sort of clicked with the "I'm Into CB" single, really, and I realised that it was sort of meant to be funny as well, which I think was a very important part of The Fall, which I hope doesn't get overlooked in all the analysis now. Is just quite how hilarious it was. I mean, there are lots of great little lyrical snapshots of people and ideas realised with an absurd satirical economy, and of course the actual idea of the concept of the group over more than 4 decades of this incredibly fluid thing fronted by a man who appeared not to want to be there. It's just, and for it to be even considered as entertainment is just so. It was so funny, and a lot of the fun of being a Fall fan as well was being part of this sort of joke, I think, where he'd kind of make you, it's certainly been a Fall fan in London, almost to punish you. The gigs would be on in the weirdest places, like semi-abandoned Irish social clubs up in Cricklewood or derelict discos in Croydon, and you'd go to these places and you never knew which side of the line separating a transcendental show from one that didn't click it was going to be. And I will miss the adventure of being a Fall fan and of being part of this sort of this community of people that you get to sort of tacitly know, who have this sort of begrudging loyalty to it.
I mean, I'm not making comparisons, but people who follow Dylan, obviously one of the kind of things they do, they go to concerts and try and work out what Dylan songs Dylan is playing. Yeah. I mean, do you think there was something of The Fall in that way? Because we're so used to show business these days where it runs like, it just runs to the same cues every time. You never knew what you were going to get.
It was so exciting and unpredictable that, it made it, you didn't know what was going to happen. If I wasn't working and they had like a 4-night run in places, I would try and go every night, and the difference between one night and the next could be just astounding. I mean, last year, or year before last year, I saw 4 nights in a row in Islington, and the different way he interpreted different songs at vastly different lengths on different nights would be totally different, and depending what attitude he brought to the stage, whether it was playful or hostile or whatever, and you never got to the end of it, and whichever the album recorded version of a song was, rather like Dylan, that was just what happened that day. That was that take, and they were fluid and could change. And I loved the fact that it for rock music, it had incredible improvisatory elements, but also this grinding, crushing, pulverizing repetition at the same time. And I will I'll just miss I still had that thing like a kid, when's the new album out, wanting to hear what it was.
And would you sit down? You've obviously studied the lyrics and everything, because another thing, live, you couldn't hear what he was saying at all, really, a lot of the time. So did you actually sit and try and decipher the words to get the little bon mots out of it?
Well, you could. I mean, they were much more clear in the mid-'80s, but I think he sort of ran away from when he's a sort of bloke, when they were saying he was a great poet and a brilliant lyricist, and I think then the thing he would do then is shy away from that. And in the last few albums, he was rather brilliantly experimenting, I think, with a kind of incoherence where the voice was becoming like a growl or a bark, and he was trying these sort of textures, and there would be tiny little phrases still pop out. On the last album, the phrase that popped out was, "We worship at the altar of phyllo pastry." I noticed that in there somewhere, in amongst the people just going, and stuff like that. It was superb. I never tired of it. And actually, part of the mystery of it was the way little snatches would jump out at you, and you wondered what it was all about.
Yeah. What was the best Fall gig you ever saw, do you think?
I saw 52.
Right.
So it is a blur, but probably, like everyone says, the best album's the one they hear first. And the first Fall gig I saw, they played Conspiracy at it. I don't think it had come out at that point. It was at the Elephant Fair, which was a hippie festival in Cornwall, where they brought a black cloud of sarcastic menace to an idyllic environment, and did Garden and Smile and all these long epic tracks. Bricks had just joined, so there was this extra vocal quality. They still had the 2-drummer lineup, and it was all lit by flaming torches, and it was just, I'll never forget that. And it was a sort of moment where, I've written about it before, but I thought I didn't realise quite how exciting culture could be, and from that night, and I knew things like that, they set you on a course. Lots of people have said this sort of thing, and it's important not to make reminiscences of someone else about you, but I would have an utterly different life without the Fall. They got me reading Camus, they got me reading Sartre, Lovecraft, Arthur Machen, they got me listening to Can and the Velvet Underground, and they got me into, I saw Ted Chippington, the comedian, opening for them. I'd never have seen otherwise, and he was why I'm a stand-up. So, and I've made and maintained friendships as a result of liking them, and so you and it gives a sort of cycle to your life. When's the next Fall album coming out, and where should we go and see them? And for lots of people, that it's hard to know what will replace that.
So genuinely life changing.
Yeah, and also I think they probably mean a lot to a very specific sort of person. After Bowie died, it was a general. Everyone knew who he was, and everyone had a position, a notion of his place in the culture. With the Fall, I think it's a very intense thing for particular people, and it's strange where, he was on Newsnight, but 95% of the people watching it will never have heard of them, and yet the impact they have on the niche that likes them is just tremendous.
Get ready for old stories of teenage sex from the early 60s, etc. That was from 1981 Slate's EP. I only ever listened to it on the Live in London cassette, which was from the Chaos Tapes label, and An Older Lover was just listed as a question mark because it was unreleased at the time of the performance. Marky Smith had told the NME that he thought that they'd released the wrong recording, and he was really angry about that, but I think it must be nice for Marky Smith to have something to be angry about. When I used to listen to The Fall, they were pretty much the only band I listened to in the early 90s. They were the band I went to see the most. It was like being a student and discovering Kurt Vonnegut and then only reading Kurt Vonnegut novels, and you got into a sort of dark hole. And I remember reading this piece about Joy Division, and the writer described listening to them as something like going into a dark room and then hearing the door slam behind you, and that's how I used to feel listening to The Fall, like I was in the bottom of a deep hole holding a little dog.
We're joined now by Clint Boone of the Inspiral Carpet.
Anyway, this is my mini fall retrospective. And they're my favourite band. I don't listen to them so much anymore because sometimes I can't take it, but this is from 1988's I'm Curious Orange, and this is Big New Prince.
Rockin' records, rockin' records, rock the record, rockin' records, the guys rock records. A big praise, big praise, a big praise. Rock the records, rock the record, rock record.
God, I love that song. I always thought of The Fall as just Marky Smith, really. You know, he's this genius lunatic who had a few session musicians around him who translated his genius vision into music, but it's just not true. I mean, of course, he's singularly extraordinary creator, but The Fall, I mean, probably every lineup was full of visionaries and incredible musicians, and now a bunch of them, Brix Smith, Starr, Jason Brown, Steve Hanley, Paul Hanley, Steve Trafford, all from different eras of The Fall, have formed Brix and The Extricated, and I went to see them live a few weeks ago, and it just made me so happy because seeing these musicians have a kind of second life through this new band, but also because it's the sound of The Fall, and that sound is their legacy as much as Marky's. They get to, you know, own it too, and it's Brix. You know, I think I love all the early Fall stuff, Hex, Induction Hour, and all that early stuff. But you know, Live at the Witch Trials, but when I think about the songs that stay with me the most, it's Big New Prince and, you know, Friends Experiment and all the stuff that Brix was around for. And anyway, this is Brix and The Extricated, and this is Something to Lose.
Hey, Clint, it's sad news, this, isn't it?
Yeah, it's sad, but these days come, don't they? We're sort of getting used to losing our idols, aren't we, one by one?
When you say idol, is it? Would it be fair to call Marky Smith an idol of yours? When you think back to being a young man and thinking about forming a band, was Marky Smith someone who was an inspirational figure?
Absolutely. I mean, my idols musically went from being Elvis Presley to being Mark Smith. It was simple as that, really. When you know, I was pretty early on the punk scene. I saw the Pistols at the Electric Circus December 1976. So from that moment, it was all about punk for me. And then I first saw The Fall. If I remember right, I think it was the last night at the Electric Circus, which would be later in 1977. And just immediately, it was just, they were punk, but they were just so anti-punk as well. I mean, this bloke had I think he had a red satin shirt on or something, and like smart trousers, you know, stay-pressed trousers, and he did a little skippy sort of dance that wasn't like anything any of the punks did, you know what I mean? And I fell in love with him immediately, and it inspired me to want to be in a band. And then when I got in a band, there was a very strong Fall influence on our early music.
What was he like to work with? A lot of people have told me, you know, certainly Phil Jones, who manages John Cooper Clarke and has promoted gigs with The Fall since 1979. He said that when he arranged to do something with Mark had a real kind of northern working class work ethic. If he said be there at 9, he was there at 9. He said he was always totally reliable.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, he was actually. I mean, we did the Sparrows did a famous collaboration with him on the I Want You single, which we did recorded in Parr Street, Liverpool. So we had the actual recording session. We did a couple of photo shoots with him. We did Top of the Pops. We got him on Top of the Pops for his only appearance. So on every occasion, he was punctual, but he could be hard work. You know, I mean, one of the big things with Mark, he was very unpredictable. He was eccentric. He could be horrible. He could be beautiful. You know what I mean? I saw every side of him, but I think in a nutshell, to answer your question, in terms of what he was like to work with, I treasured every moment that we got to spend with him creative. I mean, I did the Clint Boone Experience. We did a gig in London, and he got up and did the Stooges, So I Want to Be Your Dog for the encore, which was one of the proudest moments. So I did work with him on several occasions, but when sometime in the mid-90s, I got a call from him. He left a message on the answer phone, and he was asking me to join the Fall. In fact, I've still got a tape somewhere, and it was something along the lines of, "Hi, Clint, it's Mark Smith here. Listen, the Fall need a new keyboard player, and I think you're the man for it. So give me a call, and we'll make it happen, you know." So, and I got back to him. I said, "Look, Mark, I'm really busy at the moment. I'm doing this, I'm doing that," and I was totally. I made it up. I just didn't want to be in the Fall. You know what I mean? Because I knew I love the Fall. I love Mark, you know, to this day, but I wouldn't want to be in the Fall anymore. I've been working with him and saw how hard it could be. You know what I mean? I'd seen that. It was hard. Doing what we did with Mark was hard, but beautiful. And the results were just incredible. And, you know, that art is like that sometimes. Art is painful to create, isn't it, you know?
Well, we're going to play I Want You, and which is a great record, and it is a fantastic collaboration. You know, his vocals make this. In fact, you know, I don't know whether anyone listens to your version of it without him, you know, because his version made it so did you have to work very hard to get the vocals? Were you sort of, you know, in the control room shouting at him down the talkback for hours on end, and he was being irascible?
What we did it in Parr Street one Friday night. Pascal Gabriel, our producer, had left the building because he said, I don't want to work on the B-sides. I think it was going to be a B-side originally. And we left his prized microphone. Pascal had this beautiful mic that was worth about 10 grand. It was like an antique microphone with a big valve in it. And we did it with Cliff Norell was the engineer, and we sat waiting for Mark to arrive. I think he got there a little bit late. We walked into the studio and said, "Clint, have you got 60 quid for a taxi?" He got a taxi from Prestwich to Liverpool. I mean, he came in and we set the tape rolling, and he just did a shout, like right on one of the first lines, and he just knocked the mic across the studio, and it just destroyed it. We had to start again with a different mic. But what we did, he did it pretty much in one take, and then we just did a bit of cut and paste and chopped it into position, you know, to make it the call and response sort of thing that we ended up with.
Yeah.
But yeah, totally captured the spirit of, you know, the madness of Mark.
Well, good talking to you, Clint, and you know, that's perfect that the first thing you did was ask you for 60 quid for the taxi. That's perfect. So, but you know, here we go with memories of Marky Smith collaborating with the Inspirals, I Want You.
Six Music News.
Music News with Mark.
As we've been talking about all morning, and you would have heard yesterday on Six Music, Marky Smith of The Fall has died, age 60. The Fall's manager, Pam Vander, confirmed the news, didn't reveal much information about the circumstances of his death, just saying on Twitter, "The day I've been dreading. It was with deep regret that we announced the passing of Marky Smith. He passed away at home this morning. A more detailed statement will follow in the next few days. In the meantime, Pam and Mark's family request privacy at this sad time." The Fall had cancelled a series of gigs last year. There was a 7-date stretch of concerts in New York, which would have been the Fall's first US shows in 10 years, with his manager citing a mix of bizarre and rare medical issues connected to his throat, mouth, dental and respiratory system. It's kind of hard to know where to start describing Mark's influence, and difficult to know how to pay tribute to him, because you kind of get the feeling that the idea of various media commentators suddenly discussing their passion for The Fall would have been exactly the thing he would have absolutely hated. Yeah. Having led The Fall through 4 decades and innumerable lineup changes, he kind of stands as one of the most remarkable characters in British music, a truly original lyricist and songwriter, a combative, contrary, seemingly antisocial singular figure who loved his band and loved his music but refused in any way to temper his character for what, you know, a singer in a rock band is supposed to represent. He was born into a working class family in Salford, March 5th, 1957. Grew up in Prestwich. Found work originally in a meat factory and then as a shipping clerk on the Manchester docks, where he used to write music on his lunch breaks, but then saw the Sex Pistols play at Manchester Free Trade Hall, quitting the docks to go and form The Fall, named after the novel by Albert Camus. The gig that the Sex Pistols played at is kind of famous because it was a show that would inspire countless other bands in Manchester, including the Buzzcocks, from forming. Here's Mark talking about that moment.
I was just interested in any groups that were playing anything vaguely garage. I was, you know, always into like Can and a lot of the American mid-60s groups who sort of made one sort of single and disappeared, like sort of our new single is by a group like that, you know. And I sort of I went there and I thought it was pretty good. I mean, it was I sort of had a group then of three of us, but we didn't sort of. The good thing about it was we never sort of took ourselves seriously, because in them days you sort of still thought you had to have like smoke bombs and everything to even go on stage or even contemplate doing anything on stage. Whereas these people were like sort of, you know, doing really good songs, and everything was very interesting what they were doing, and you know, we thought we could do as good, if not better.
So the four were launched by Mark alongside his friends Martin Brammer, Tony Frill and Una Baines. Una Baines apparently missed the first gig because she couldn't afford a keyboard, so it wasn't there. Their first two albums, Live at the Witch Trials, which was recorded in a single day. It's a bit of a classic. And Dragnet both arrived in 1979, both of which feature a Mr. Mark Riley, friend of this parish. The idea of The Fall being a vehicle for Mark was established pretty early on, and over 4 decades he hired and fired dozens of musicians. 66 band members, I believe it is, came and went over their existence, and about 1/3 only played in the band for less than a year.
It was almost like a sort of youth employment scheme in the 70s and 80s and up north, that, really.
Yeah, it wasn't just musicians. He once reportedly fired a sound technician for ordering a salad.
Ordering a salad. I hope that's true.
I hope that's true. But as Marky Smith once famously said, if it's me and your granny on bongos, it's The Fall.
But I got this thing, reputation as like as a sack master, you know what I mean? Keep firing people and all that. This is even like common knowledge now. Even anywhere I go now, people on the street go, "You're the one who's had all them group members." I don't see what the problem is.
But from 1979 to 2017, they released some incredible records, 32, I believe, studio records, almost as many live albums, occasionally grazing the mainstream, I suppose. 1993's The Infotainment Scan went top 10, and their cover of Holland and Dozier's There's a Ghost in My House was a top 40 hit. But that was never the point of The Fall.
No, I remember when the Friends experiment came out, everybody went, "Oh, you know, that's well produced. You're really going for it, aren't you?" You know.
Yeah, Mark was just always interested in pursuing his own, you know, his artistic muse too pretentious a statement. I don't think it is. It was
he just plowed his furrow.
Exactly, you know, which would take the form of these incredibly satirical, surreal, caustic, sometimes very intricate, sometimes sort of sci-fi, sometimes sociological songs with often very incomprehensible lyrics, but just unlike anybody else. Here's Mark talking about his songwriting and his lyrics back in 1985.
I'm told I use too many words, but you see, what I have is a very original approach to writing. See, because it's not educated, but it's not jargonised. I don't think. I hope it's not. I just write sort of stuff, you know, that supposedly has got something to say. See, so sometimes I forget about that. I mean, that's a good thing. I mean, it's something you've got to remember. You're writing music, and you've got to have a word that puts a chill up everybody's spine and stuff. You know, it doesn't matter what the word is; it's the way you use it with the music. Sometimes I sort of overreach myself and I just write a lot, and I think it's good and perverted by language a lot. It happens a lot that, you know, it's just the verse is the main part of the song, you know.
No one has ever taken inspiration from as many obscure references and sources as Marky Smith. I mean, his impact on other bands is just staggering, be that Pulp, LCD Sound System, Interpol, Pavement especially, even bands like Cabbage are around at the moment.
Very much.
John Peel obviously championed The Fall, played countless sessions for them. He was married 3 times, first tied the 1983 with Brick Smith, who became a band member, of course, and she's done shows on this station. After their divorce, he was married to Saffron Pryor, who'd run the band's fan club. During the 90s, he married Elena Pulu in Berlin, and she joined The Fall as a keyboard player in 2002. His partner at the time of death was Pam Vander, who was the band's manager, as we just said. Last year, the BBC, let's not forget, mistakenly announced that Marky Smith had died.
I bet he found that quite funny.
Prompting him to reveal, he sort of said in minutes he was being stopped by fans of The Fall, saying that he was dead. He said he was actually quite ill around that time, but had started to feel better. He said it's kind of interesting when people come up to you and say, "Oh yeah, by the way, you're dead." So yeah, we obviously send our best to his former bandmates, all of them, and obviously his family and his friends.
That's The Fall and Cruisers Creek. Gideon.6music at bbc.co.uk 64046 at BBC Good Co Show. The best thing to do in circumstances such as this, sad circumstances such as this, with the passing of Mark E. Smith, is to let Six Music listeners get in touch and to ask for records and to share stories. Paul in Manchester says, I directed a Radio 4 sitcom about a taxi rank and cast Mark E. Smith as a drunk caller, securing him comprised of me nervously calling him at home. He'd ask if I was the gas man and repeatedly hung up. This went on for some time. After much anticipation, he showed up to recording, and after shadowboxing me, a great performance was delivered, and he was a true gent. Couldn't believe my luck. Thanks very much for that, and all the best to you, Paul in Manchester. Ian says, pre-internet, Mark E. Smith's lyrics were a young person's guide to historical events, philosophy, and science fiction authors. He practically taught me how and what to read and what to listen to as well, lest we forget. And he really knew how to put a band together. How about paintwork? That's a fine suggestion. With sad regards. That's from Ian. And Ray says, such a sad day, but what a body of work to leave behind. How to pick just one? Impossible. Take your pick from any of the following: Frightened, Lie, Dream of a Casino Soul, Garden, Smile, Theme from Sparta FC, Hit the North, Cruisers Creek, Mountain Energy, etc., etc., etc. What a wonderful, mad, infuriating genius. As I mentioned, after 10 o'clock, it will be an hour of Peel session recordings by The Fall. That's on the way from 10 o'clock, and more from them between now and then. And there's also been a request for this. This is a live version of a Fat White Family tune called I Am Mark E. Smith.
to prove it. Really better, really better. You know it ain't that pretty, you must be.
The Fall and Glam Racket, BBC Radio 6 Music. It's Gideon Co with you. And this arrives from John, who says, being marooned in southern Spain has its downside. After all, Marky Smith was the difference between the really very good and the exceptional. From my very first show in Liverpool on my birthday in the 80s to the final ATP show a while back, he was never boring. I have a night a year with great mates listening exclusively, almost exclusively, to The Fall. This year we'll add another date in his honour. A genius has left us, but has left us wiser. John is one of many to ask for von Sudenfeld, who will probably feature, I'd imagine, more likely tomorrow, because it's just in terms of we're spinning plates here in terms of getting stuff on air, but it's a good call, that's for sure. Neil Wooden Under Edge says, absolutely gutted, we shall not see his like again. Was at the cancelled at the last minute Bristol gig. Seemed like an ending was coming. It would be great to hear either Brillo de facto or New Facts Emerge from the current last album. Mark always pushed the new stuff. We'll play something from the last album a little later. Ian in Nottingham. A couple of favourites of mine are Australians in Europe and Lucifer over Lancashire. And one of those will feature before too long as well. Also recall a tale of Mark coming out of a building after a heavy session in Manchester and getting into what he thought was a minicab. It was actually a private car being driven by Damon Gough, aka Badly Drawn Boy, who was waiting to pick a friend up. Damon did actually take him home to Mark's home in Prestwich, and Mark, unaware of the identity of his chauffeur, then said he had no money and paid for his ride home with his leather jacket. I played LA earlier, and Mark C gets in touch to say, I have a Festive 50 recording where Peely states, my least favourite Fall track, even the great man couldn't always be correct. My favourite Fall track, says Mark, too many to mention, doesn't matter what you play tonight, it will be worth hearing. I hope so. And mention of John Peel, I believe this was the Fall number he chose on Desert Island Discs.
The number 3 lathe. Went down the town to a HM club, sign at a cross, no couple well dressed. They looked at my coat, they looked at my hair. An Easy Rider coupe grabbed the edge of my coat, said you're too smart for here, said I'll see the manager. He was the manager. Eat yourself better. Up the stairs, mister. Eat yourself better.
Here's my very brief story. I fell in love with The Fall in 1982, and I'm still in love. I almost broke into tears when I first heard the Container Drivers when I was 11. I'm now 46. The session version of Container Drivers on the way before too long. First saw them at Hammersmith Odeon in 1988. Last saw them in Wakefield in November 2017, which I think was their last ever gig. I'm going to have Put Away played at my funeral, so if it's not played tonight, for the benefit of me and for my brother John, I'm cancelling my licence fee. That would be justified, sort of, but we'll see what we can do. If we don't, then rest assured, tributes will continue tomorrow here on Six Music and beyond, because on Sunday from 1 o'clock you can hear the Totally Wired World of the Fall, which is also available to listen to on the via the iPlayer and the Six Music website as well. The Totally Wired World of the Fall of Whichmore on air on Six Music from 1 p.m. on Sunday. But expect tributes from Sean and from Lauren, and I think it's just Mark Radcliffe in this week. But expect all that, and indeed from Steve tomorrow here on Six Music. Nick, thanks for the Fall tribute. Lifelong Fall fan and feeling numb by the news. I'm feeling numb would be an appropriate song, I guess. Marky Smith will always be appreciated for what he gave us with The Fall. Babs, late of Nunhead, says, The Fall on form could really swing live. My first time, Melbourne, 1982. Final time, London, 2016. I hope the Hip Priest knew how very, very much he was appreciated. They did a fine cover version of this.